Welcome sa ating channel mga kaibigan, and yes, we are here with the Ryzen 5 5600X and RTX 3070 from MSI. So ang gagawin po natin ngayong PC build is to showcase the performance of 5600X. At the same time, some new components in here like this chassis Tecware Forge S, MSI components, the motherboard, the potential in terms of overclocking, comparing it to 3600 kasi ang daming gustong maghanap kung is it worth it if I will upgrade from 3600 to 5600X. Ito is bagay na bagay para sa ating mga kaibigan na naka 3600 na ngayon, or yung mga kaibigan natin that into tight budget and yet undecided kung 3600 ba or go na for the 5600X for 5,000 plus additional. And yes, let's do this, and feel free to subscribe for more videos like this. This video is brought to you by SCDKey, the best website that you may visit in terms of very affordable deals and best offer para sa application softwares, games, and yes, operating system. And there you are, you may check the Windows 10 Pro, and by using our promo code, ma-avail mo lang siya ng around $14.95 or 700 plus. That's it mga kaibigan, check the description below. May mga links po tayo dyan to go directly sa kanilang website. Before we will jump to the time-lapse video, it's a very quick time-lapse kasi ang pupuntahan kagad natin is yung benchmark and pag-uusapan natin kagad yung mga bagong components. Pero before that, yung testing methodology po na ginawa natin dito is 5600X with an X570 Tomahawk. So X570 Tomahawk is a safe motherboard since it comes with this very good VRM. At the same time, reviews out there can vouch that this is the best motherboard that we may consider with this kind of processor if you will go for a less hassle, at the same time easier overclocking with the RAM and at the same time with the processor. Pero since the new thing in here is the processor, so mas focus tayo dun sa 5600X. And yes, we did this with the sweet spot frequency of 3600 RAM, at the same time an airflow new chassis from Tecware, the Tecware Forge S. And yes, why Tecware? Because of this premium build that you will know later. Okay, so before we will jump to details, tingnan muna natin ang ating very quick time-lapse video. Aesthetics-wise, maganda siya. Syempre, dahil ang ginamit po natin is uniform motherboard and video card with the Gaming X Trio. So, alam nyo naman na napakaganda at yan yung flagship lineup ng MSI lagi. And for the chassis, it is the Forge S with this good or decent performance fans na Tecware F1, and it's really very aggressive fans that is already proven by a lot of users. Marami na tayong pinakitang videos, at the same time marami na rin kayong makikita mga reviews of the users na nakabili na ng mga Tecware Forge M, and then eto, meron na tayong Tecware Forge S. It is much improved compared sa Tecware Forge na previous ATX variant po neto, especially with the other parts na we will discuss later. Now let's jump with the AMD Ryzen 5 5600X. Yes, all of the reviews are stating the same. 5600X is yes the best processor compared sa 3600. There is a huge leap in terms of gaming performance. Yes, I can vouch that. With a 1080p resolution, makikita natin mga kaibigan that with this side-by-side comparison with a Gears Tactics game and yung performance analysis na nagpapakita mga kaibigan is sobrang layo nga naman talaga. You can see in here that there is a very high frame time, and yes, there is a very low frame rate for the 1080p 3600. So by that benchmark alone, we can now unanimously say that 5600X is way better than the 3600. So when will the time that 3600 will have also an edge or at least go on par with the 5600? So we'll just be using the same game to benchmark both processor at a 1440p resolution. So makikita nyo dyan mga kaibigan that at a 1440p, the 3600 versus the 5600X is almost on par. Oops! Teka lang, parang very against po yan sa mga games or sa mga benchmarks na nakita natin with the other tech reviews. Pero what's good thing in here is we have the data of the frame time. Kaya makikita natin dito mga kaibigan that there is a huge difference pagdating sa rendering between processors. Here at the 5600X, there is almost 20 to 30% advantage pagdating sa frame time. Kaya makikita natin mga kaibigan that the average minimum FPS with the 5600X processor is way higher compared sa minimum average FPS ng 3600. Ibig sabihin lang po niyan mga kaibigan, there is a higher chance of stuttering or delay pagdating sa 3600 over the 5600X. Mas smooth ng 90 FPS over the 70 plus FPS ng 3600 ang 5600X. Kaya nga ito nga po ang nagsasabi na hindi po always na yung average FPS yung basis that this is a better video card or this is just on par processor. Kailangan din po natin makita yung performance ng 1% low kung same nga yung average FPS pero meron namang higher chance of stuttering. Pero before we'll end this 1440p resolution discussion, try to check again the utilization of GPU with a 1440p resolution and 5600X. Makikita nyo dyan mga kaibigan that it's 99% GPU utilized. Ibig sabihin na ma-maximize yung GPU with a 5600X over 3600 na it's still below 95% usage. So ibig sabihin there is a slight bottleneck experience. Actually, it's not yet bottleneck kasi nasa 90% above pa rin naman ang utilization ng GPU, pero still, that is a very high percentage compared sa 5600X. Kaya even we tried our best to find the favor for the 3600 at a 1440p and 1080p resolution, talagang mas lamang ang 5600X. Alright, so let's end that comparison. Now let's move on to the 5600X in terms of overclocking. We tried to overclock this processor at a 4.8 GHz, 1.265 voltage for the V-core, and at the same time 1.13 SoC voltage, and of course mode 4 or mode 5 for the LLC at a 4.8 GHz, pero nag-crash. This is a silicon lottery. Ibig sabihin, tsambahan lang po. Yes, we have found benchmarks or overclocking done at a 1.265 volts, and they are very successful with their settings. We tried to replicate those settings, yet we failed. So we tried it again with a 1.325 voltage up to 1.3 voltage. And yes, we made successful to run games at a 4.8 gigahertz by running some of the games like Shadow of Tomb Raider. And yes, nakita natin na natapos naman yung benchmark. And yet, we find it very useless yung manual overclocking unless you will be going for a Autodesk Revit. Pero going for a 6-cores processor for CPU rendering is, I think, unadvisable at a 15K plus price point. It's better if you will just settle down with the 3700X. Pero for the sake of benchmark, here is the graph in terms of gaming between the PBO and manually overclocked processor. So if you are more into gaming but not much in rendering, or you are into rendering but more onto GPU, like you are using Lumion, you are using Blender 3D, and yes, 5600X is a very good enough processor that you will partner with an RTX 3070. Now let's move on to the chassis. Bakit ito yung pinili natin? There are higher chassis that I have used before. Like recently, we used Corsair 4000D, the MSI Gaming 110R ARGB. That is really very recommended chassis for an MSI build. Pero this time around, we also choose the Tecware Forge S. We know that Tecware is more known sa mga budget builds or sa mga bang for the buck lineup. But for now, as you can see sa ating time-lapse video, napakaganda nung kanyang aesthetics, and we tried to measure also the thickness of this chassis, and this is 0.9mm thick SGCC or SECC steel, and this is way thicker than chassis with almost the same price point at a 4K plus from Cooler Master, Corsair, and Fantex. So dito pa lang makikita natin, mga kaibigan, that Tecware is now going up with the standards of being a premium chassis that you should consider. Hindi na po siya budget chassis lang, unlike before. Actually, other recent release naman ng chassis are based on standard talaga. Like kung ano yung standard sa mga mainstream brands. Kaya yun yung dahilan kung bakit ko na-appreciate ang chassis na to. Kasi they are not trying to compromise materials. We easily mount 240mm radiator at the top. At the same time, route cables. And yes, my favorite slot or cutout, yung GPU PCIe cable cutouts dito sa kanyang PSU shroud is not missed. So, yan yung pinaka-paborito ko. Mas maganda kasi tingnan kung makita mo yung kable na lalabas na lang dyan sa may PSU shroud dahil meron siyang cutout. And of course, the clearance if you want to mount 360mm radiator, and proven and tested that we can also mount a long PSU like this 850 watts platinum PSU na hindi natin nagawa sa mga previous builds. Actually, may mga previous builds ako recently na ito dapat yung power supply na kailangan kong gamitin or gusto kong gamitin, pero hindi ko mailagay dahil nga hindi enough yung clearance. Pero Tecware allowed us for this kind of budget Tecware na 3K plus or not more than 4K. It's really something that we didn't expect. Kasi the fact that we can mount a radiator at the top is very good enough, especially for PC enthusiasts that are now highly encouraged na gamitin yung mga chassis that you can install top mount radiator. Tecware didn't fail us for always providing awesome products at a very low pricing. You can actually buy this chassis sa Shopee and Lazada. Meron po akong mga nilagay na links even with the other components na ginamit natin dito, the Tecware Flex, the RTX 3070 5600X, other components, X570, motherboard. Nandyan po lahat sa description yung mga links. Just feel free to check it. Even with the other videos, previous videos. Kasi ang daming nagko-comment lagi na sana nilink mo naman yung product kasi ang hirap maghanap. Kaya ayun, pwede nyo nang balikan yung mga videos na yon and look for these stores. Random stores yung mga nilagay ko doon. Wala pa akong personal attachment and connection sa mga stores na yan. As I said sa aking disclaimer, hindi po tayo affiliated sa kanila. So, it's better to choose COD pag bumibili kayo anywhere sa Shopee and Lazada, especially kung overseas yung seller, para ma-inspect nyo muna yung product before you pay. Yun po yung pinaka-recommendation ko. Kung ayaw pa-inspect ng nagdi-deliver, din huwag yung i-receive. Ganun lang po yung mga kaibigan, para safe lang po tayo, especially kung overseas. Hindi naman sa napaka-duda natin, pero Of course, I also want to avoid na nandahil lang sa link na nilagay ko po dyan is baka may ma-scam po sa atin or may makareceive ng mga, ayun, yung mga kumakalat na instead na processor ang dumating ba to. And yes, if you want also to see my general discussion or general advice sa pagpili ng 3600 with a PC build, yan na po yung pinaka-final na talagang 3600 yung didiscuss ko. Check somewhere here. And also some dedicated videos with RTX 3000 series and Ryzen 5 3600 somewhere here. Alright, so that's it guys. And thank you so much.